What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Players with the highest upside. In this video, I'm not going to be talking about weekly upside. I made a video about 2 months ago that went over really good players to draft in best ball leagues that are looking for that weekly high-end production. This video is going to be about the entire season, which players have a bunch of upside for where you can get them in drafts. Remember, of course, that upside isn't everything. Some players I talk about will come with a lot of risk. So when you're making these decisions on who to draft, think about that as well. It's a combination of risk and upside. I've decided for this video to only include players going in the 4th round and later because basically everyone in the top 3 rounds has a bunch of upside. So just pretend that it's this list plus all of the players going in the first 3 rounds. Before we start, let's do the stat of the day. Today's stat: among running backs with at least 125 carries last season, Matt Breida saw the highest percent of his carries go for 10 or more yards. Who had the second highest rate? All right, let's get things started off with our boy, Chris Godwin. I can't possibly make an upside video without talking about Chris Godwin. He finished as the wide receiver 25 last season, and now there are 234 vacated targets available in this offense. I'm pretty sure most of those are not going to go to Brashard Perriman. He was the team's top red zone option last season while playing on less than 65% of the team's snaps. He was a lock button play in DFS whenever Deshaun Jackson was out, and now both Jackson and Humphries are gone. It's been proven that players see a bump in production when they move into the slot, and that's going to be his role whenever the Bucks go to 3 wide receiver sets. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 18 and 19 depending on the site, which honestly is his floor as long as he doesn't get hurt. And given that he's only ever showed up on a single injury report one time and then played that week, we need to be drafting him everywhere. Tyler Lockett is number 2, and you've heard, I'm sure, a number of times that Lockett was overly efficient last season. He had 16.9 yards per reception and 13.8 yards per target, despite having a career average of 13.2 yards per reception and 8.8 yards per target. He also scored 10 touchdowns on 57 receptions, despite 9 touchdowns on 137 receptions entering last season. So you're like, Nick, what are you doing? I mean, these are bad stats. They're saying he's going to regress. Absolutely. He's going to be less efficient this season. But that doesn't mean he can't go absolutely nuts. I mean, the current Seahawks wide receiver core is DK Metcalf, who's currently going to be having surgery this week and was already at elevated injury risk. Then you've got David Moore and Jaron Brown, who have never been over 500 receiving yards each. At tight end, they have Will Dissly, Jacoby Hollister, and Nick Vannett. Like, none of these guys are going to command any sort of real target share. So while this is by no means a high-volume passing attack, Lockett is going to have such a high target share that he can easily make up for it. He's going to see a lot more targets than he had last season. I currently have him with a 24.5% projected target market share, which I believe is very safe, and it ultimately comes out with the 17th highest projection among wide receivers. And it gives him wide receiver 1 upside if the touchdowns go his way again this season. Robbie Anderson rounds out the wide receivers I'll talk about in this video, and I'm higher on the Jets offense than most people are this season. I believe in Sam Darnold, and I think they're going to play at a much faster pace than they have in recent years. They finished 32nd, 22nd, and 32nd in total play volume over the last 3 seasons, and they went no huddle on just 4% of their plays last year. Now that's important. Fantasy production requires volume, so it's very tough to produce. Even if you're a good player, you have a decent offense, it's tough to produce when your team's just not running a bunch of plays. So far this preseason, the Jets have gone no huddle on 11 of Sam Darnold's 23 plays. That's obviously way too small of a sample to really mean a whole lot, but it's showing they're trying out this offense under no huddle. And I know it's just the preseason, but they've scored 2 touchdowns on his 4 drives, and they've looked good. But beyond anything else, it supports what we were already thinking. Going into camp, we were like, okay, this offense has been bad in recent years, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to run no huddle and to run hurry up and run all the plays when you have a bad offense. Like, you want to shorten the game and increase variance. Well, now that the offense is better, they're much more likely to increase their play volume, to play faster, because they're like, hey, we think we have a good offense. Let's get a lot of plays out there and win this game. Then what do we see in the preseason? They play faster. So it just supports what we were already thinking. The Jets' starting 3 wide receivers are going to be Robbie Anderson, Quincy Enunwa, and Jamison Crowder, with Anderson as the clear top option among those 3. Anderson was the 6th highest rated wide receiver from week 14 on last season, which was when Sam Darnold came back from his injury. He averaged 5.7 receptions, 84 receiving yards, and 0.75 touchdowns over that stretch. He currently has my 19th highest projection among wide receivers, and he's one of those players that's not being drafted high because people don't believe in the offense. But don't be fooled. They're going to be better than you think. Let's move on to tight end. I'm going to give you 2 options. So the first is O.J. Howard. Howard enters his 3rd season, having never eclipsed 570 receiving yards and has never been over 6 receiving touchdowns. But that's the thing with young tight ends, is that they don't typically produce that much. But Howard has one of the best possible athletic profiles for a tight end, and he's produced when he's been on the field. Excluding week 4 last season when he left due to injury, and then of course the games he didn't play in, his season-long pace was 60 receptions for 1,000 yards and a little under 9 touchdowns. Like I said with Godwin, there are 234 vacated targets this season for the Bucs offense. A ton of those are going to go to Godwin and Howard. Howard played on just 2/3 of the Bucs offensive snaps during his first 2 years, but this season he's moving into a full-time role. He could legitimately finish as the tight end 1, yet he's going a few rounds later than that top 3. And it's that same thing with Hunter Henry. So these 2 tight ends, plus to be honest, Evan Ingram, but that trio of tight end are the ones I'm drafting this season. Because yeah, you can spend a 2nd round pick on Kelsey, but we have Tyreek Hill back. You could spend the mid-3rd to early 4th round pick on Kittle and on Ertz, but this trio is just as safe and has just as much upside as the elite guys do, but they're going at a much greater discount. So Hunter Henry, let's talk about him. He's now entering his 4th season as a pro, and like Howard, he's been extremely productive when he's been on the field. As per Bobby Sylvester, Henry has 115 targets in his career. Over their respective careers, here's how he compares to Ertz, Kelsey, and Gronk on a per 115 target basis. He ties Kelsey for the most receptions in that group. He's second to only Gronk in receiving yards, and he's first in receiving touchdowns. Rivers absolutely loves targeting his tight ends, and he finally has a season where he's going to be the sole tight end of target in this offense. He's been in on nearly every first-team snap this preseason, playing the slot on 28% of those snaps, and split wide on 9%. Like I just said, I have very rarely been targeting the top 3 tight ends because I love this next tier of Howard and Henry so much. It's such a nice discount getting them a few rounds later. Let's talk about some running backs. And the first one we'll talk about is Chris Carson. And I've talked many times about the risk in drafting Carson, but oh my goodness, does he have upside if he can stay healthy. I mean, over the last month, we've come to learn that he's clearly the starter in this offense, and they're going to try and get him involved in the passing game a lot more than in prior seasons. But look at last year. I mean, he was able to gain over 1,150 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns through just 14 weeks. And he was able to grab 20 receptions. You know, that was with Mike Davis getting 112 carries and 34 receptions. Last season, Carson was 3rd in the league in evaded tackles, 6th in yards created, and 5th in goal line carries. This offensive line is still mediocre, but the team wants to run the football a ton, and Carson has proven that he can produce as their lead back. If he plays a full 16 weeks, he's got a very good chance of finishing inside the top 12. So right now, he is my 18th highest ranked running back, and I have him ranked about a half a round ahead of where he typically goes. If you want to see my full rankings, my full projections, and player notes, check them out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Latavius Murray is the next running back, and you can't really make an upside video without talking about Latavius Murray. I mean, you can debate all you want if Ingram or Murray is more talented or if they're really close to each other, but at the end of the day, individual running back talent matters very little for fantasy. The thing you need to look at is opportunity, and when watching camp, watching the preseason, listening to Sean Payton talk about Alvin Kamara, it's very clear that they want to use him in the same capacity as before. They don't want to use him like they did when Ingram was suspended last season. The Saints' ideal outcome is to just take Latavius Murray and use him exactly how they were using Mark Ingram. And if you really want to talk about who's better, Murray is bigger, he's faster, he's a better athlete, and he's been more effective inside the 10-yard line over his career than Mark Ingram. And that's while playing on Oakland and Minnesota, not the Saints' powerhouse in their elite offensive line. So he is absolutely a flex option while Kamara is healthy, but can you just imagine if Kamara were to go down? I mean, you've essentially locked yourself in to a playoff spot. Myles Sanders is next, and he is by far the best running back on the Eagles roster. He's above the 75th percentile in every single athletic category, and he's better than Jordan Howard is in every aspect of the game. The one thing that you could possibly argue is that Howard is better at pass blocking, but Howard can't catch. So they aren't going to put him out there in that many passing downs anyways. Like, Sanders is a better fit for the Eagles offense because he doesn't give away run or pass. The Eagles are very excited this season to use 12 personnel packages, and that's the formation with 1 running back, 2 tight end, and 2 wide receiver. From this formation, it is nearly impossible to tell if a team is going to run or pass the ball. So you can't sell out to stop either, especially when you've got Ertz and Goddard as the 2 tight ends and not blocking tight ends. Because other teams will run this set, but they'll throw out blocking tight ends, and you're like, okay, well, they're probably going to run the football. Well, now you have those 2, plus you throw Myles Sanders in the backfield. I mean, defenders are going to be biting hard on play action, and they're just going to have no idea what to do. When you consider what Sanders can do in this offense with this top 3 offensive line, he could absolutely finish as a running back 1, but people are scared to draft him because they think the Eagles are going to take him off the field a bunch for Howard and Sproles and Clement. But like I've said before, yeah, he's going to lose a few snaps to these guys, but he's by far the most talented, so he will be getting the most touches, and you don't need 20 carries a game to be a running back 1. Just 2 of the top 10 running backs last season had more than 17 carries per game. So he only needs to be at like 15 carries per game to finish in the top 12. That is well within his range of outcomes this season. Next running back is Damien Harris, and he's absolutely the running back to own in New England. We know that Sony is the starter, but we also know how big of an injury risk he is. He suffered a broken shoulder blade, multiple ankle injuries, a fractured forearm, a torn ACL, and 3 separate knee strains. The Patriots drafted Damien Harris to ease the workload on Sony Michel while he's healthy, but also as an insurance policy if he were to get hurt, because they're playing for a Super Bowl this season. They would prefer not to go into the playoffs with Burkhead. Although he's good and he could run the offense, they don't want Burkhead to be the lead back with James White on 3rd downs. They want one of Damien Harris or Sony Michel to be healthy, and they think they've got a really good chance to repeat. Plus, where is he going? He's going in the 11th round, so this is not the range where you're looking for a starter. You're not looking for your running back 2 in the 11th round. You're looking for someone where if things go their way, they can put up running back 1 numbers. And if Sony Michel gets injured, Damien Harris has a chance to put up running back 1 numbers, but at worst, he's putting up running back 2 numbers, and you're starting him every week. This is an elite offense. This is an elite offensive line, and he's a very talented running back. You can't ask for much more this late in the draft. But another guy that's got a ton of upside is Darwin Thompson. I want to reiterate for about the millionth time that Damian Williams is still the Chiefs' clear lead back. But we've already seen him miss time with a hamstring pull, and no one, not one single running back, is immune to injuries. Carlos Hyde has been the worst statistical running back for every single team that he's been on, and it's not going to be any different this season. So there's no way that Thompson can't beat out Carlos Hyde as the primary backup. And if that's the case, then the Chiefs' backup running back should not be going this late in drafts. It would still take an injury to Williams for Darwin Thompson to pass him on the depth chart. That is the only way he passes him. It is an injury. Williams is bigger, he's faster, he's better in the receiving game, he's more experienced in the NFL, and he's got a better understanding of how the Chiefs' offense works. So don't think that this is like a slam dunk Kareem Hunt play from a few years ago. But he'll definitely carry people into the playoffs if Williams were to go down again. Last player we're going to talk about is Tony Pollard, And I was going to talk about just 10 players. I don't know, felt like a good number. But I couldn't leave Pollard out of the video. So he makes it as like an honorable mention, I guess. I still believe that Ezekiel Elliott is going to play this season. I really do believe he will play. But imagine the upside for Pollard if he doesn't. I mean, he is the clear lead back behind Ezekiel Elliott, and he's an exceptional pass catcher. So even when Zeke is healthy, he's playing, he's not holding out, Pollard is still going to hold like a little bit of value. Probably not starting him in a 10 or a 12 team league, but he holds a little bit of value, and they're going to use him in the offense. But what you're drafting him for is if Zeke does hold out, he is going to put up crazy numbers because they're going to use him a ton on early downs, and he's going to be the 100% third down back. And what are we looking for these late round picks? That sort of upside. For someone you can also cut right away, because remember, early in the season, weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the best waiver wire pickups. Those are when we realize how people are going to be used in offenses. So if Zeke sits out week 1 and comes back week 2, well, you've got a really nice option in week 1, and then you could honestly just cut Pollard for whoever you want on the waiver wire. But he is someone who's going to give you crazy upside if things go his way. So those are the players with the highest upside this season, taking into account where you can get them in drafts. Remember, you can download my rankings, projections, and player notes at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.